Welcome, ghouls. It is our 17th episode of the Shrouded in Darkness podcast. I'm your true crime obsessed host, Marlena. I feel it's crucial to remind you about my disclosure today, because this case is one of those with very disturbing material. We're looking at trigger warnings, so you have been warned. Today, we're diving into the story of the Werewolf Butcher. Per usual, we'll start with some background info. Our infamous butcher was born Roy Wilson on August 30th, 1969 in Spokane, Washington. His mother would marry multiple times, none of the men being decent role models, mind you. One of her husbands, though, would adopt Roy and change his name, and this is the name we know him by: Jack Owen Spillman III. Jack was a quiet kid, very withdrawn. He was also the only boy in his family of sisters. I think there were 4 kids in total, so he had 3 sisters. They grew up on a farm with gardens, chickens, rabbits, and so on. Early on, Jack portrayed what we know as predatory tendencies, but these signs weren't recognized until much later. For example, he would sit for hours on the couch, just rocking back and forth. The TV would be on, but he wasn't really paying attention to it. Basically, he would ignore anyone or anything that was around him. Also, the family's animals would turn up dead. Like I said, they had chickens and rabbits on their farm. A lot of times, it was kind of evident that the animal passed away from being strangled. As a teenager, Jack was caught exposing himself. He'd even gotten kicked out of school for doing so. By the 9th grade, he dropped out entirely. It's also believed that he was more or less bullied by girls in school, and it's possible this is what spawned his hatred toward women as an adult. So, obviously, Jack's criminal history started fairly on. Not just exposing himself, but there was also burglary and assault. He would eventually spend time in jail for rape allegations. But this was only the start. You see, he felt he resonated with wolves. He was a loner, always observing people, but staying quiet. Later on, he would even compare himself to a wolf, describing his actions as satisfying a hunger. And when you hear the details, this will make even more sense. So let's look at a few key events. After Jack was released from prison for the rape allegations, he lived with his sister, May. This was still in Washington, not far from Spokane. Also in the home was their niece. One day, the niece was complaining about a fight she'd had with a friend. Shortly after this, that same friend reported her family's home as being robbed and vandalized. And if that's not bad enough, their pet hamster was also killed in the break-in. That poor animal was bludgeoned so badly, blood was everywhere. Jack and May's niece was questioned, but no one thought to talk to Jack. And although there's nothing linking him to the crime at that time, he would later admit to his sister that it was him. There's another incident where Jack starts dating one of his sister's friends. Bear in mind, it doesn't appear that they dated for very long, but this friend got the scare of her life one night. She woke up in the middle of the night to Jack just standing over her. Apparently, he'd broken into her home and claimed he was just wanting to see her, that he missed her. Honestly, I feel like she was lucky that he was only staring at her. This could have gone much differently. So we are now in September of 1994. A 9-year-old, Penny Lynn Davis, goes missing. Jack was actually friends with that family. He'd even helped hang the missing persons flyers around town. There were no signs of her, though. Teams thoroughly searched the areas and checked with other family members, but nothing turned up. 6 months pass when a jogger finds skeletal remains in a shallow grave. This was only 12 miles from Penny's home. Just like with her disappearance, there aren't any helpful leads, and medical examiners couldn't even determine a proper cause of death because her body was so decomposed. Now we move on to April of 1995. The authorities are alerted to a brutal scene. Rita Huffman, 48 years old, and her 14-year-old daughter, Mandy, or Amanda, they're found mutilated in their home. And they happen to be discovered by Rita's older daughter. Rita and her daughter, Mandy, had been beaten and stabbed to death, and also raped. Reports say that Rita was stabbed 31 times. Mandy suffered blunt force trauma along with multiple stab wounds. Without going into too many details, some of their sensitive area skin was removed and put elsewhere. And inanimate objects were forced into places they shouldn't go. I think at one point there was the mention of a baseball bat. The only saving grace is that most of those brutal acts were committed post-mortem. But what he did to them makes it very clear why he is known as the Werewolf Butcher. He was truly a monster. Well, Jack becomes a suspect pretty quickly, partly because of his criminal history, but also because a vehicle matching his black truck was seen in the area at the time of the crime. Then there was one more key piece of evidence. On the night of the attack, Jack drove through a routine traffic stop, and a 12-inch knife covered in blood was found in his possession. This blood would actually later be tested and found to belong to the Huffman family. Authorities had their suspicions, but they didn't have anything definitive to hold Jack for. So instead, they followed him. Until enough evidence was collected, like the DNA from the knife. And on April 19th, 1995, at the age of 25, Jack was finally arrested. He would eventually admit to everything, thanks to the encouragement of one of his sisters, given they still didn't want to believe that their own brother did these things. So he admitted to what he'd done, including the murder of the 9-year-old. And the story he shares about Penny is as equally bad as the Huffmans, especially considering her age. She was only 9 years old. And her brutal murder involved 2 hours at least of torture and rape. When Jack admits to murdering these innocent people, we also learn that it wasn't just murder. He stalked his victims. He learned their routines, their patterns, and he wasn't done. He planned on continuing. Of course, if he hadn't been caught. On April 30th, 1996, so it's been over a year since he confessed, Jack Spillman was sentenced to 45.5 years for Penny's murder and life in prison without the possibility of parole for Rita and Mandy's murders. So he would never see freedom again. This case, brutal is not a strong enough word. Jack Spillman is the epitome of evil. His sisters feel he should have received the death penalty, and I honestly have to agree with them. And if I'm being truthful, I feel he should receive the same torture he gave to those victims. He cut stuff off of them. I can't imagine those actions, the gall to even do them. So, after all the research I've done, and diving deep into this case, everything just feels wrong. So let's focus on those victims. Rita and Amanda Huffman and Penny Davis. Remember those names and their families. Now, I suggest we all have a good palate cleanser. Let's scroll through some TikToks, watch some funny fails on YouTube. I think we all need something like that after this case. So, let's wrap things up. Today's sources are Monsters and Critics, Murderpedia, The Vampire Project, and the Three's a Crowd podcast. I also watched a very thorough episode of the true crime TV show Evil Lives Here. Season 7, episode 12 is all about the Werewolf Butcher. You actually get to see his sisters talk about what they went through as family members, you know. So as always, we appreciate you tuning in, and we hope that you'll connect with us on social media and our different listening platforms. Catch us next week as we discuss Jeanette De Palma. Until next time, ghouls, we'll see you then.